Live shoot on a car today. I really love setting myself these crazy challenges. We'll probably have an elephant in here one day or something. Anyway, let me tell you a little bit about car photography. I've shot many cars over the years. I used to shoot a few more years ago and assisted as well on car shoots before I started working for myself. In the last 6 months, or even less, 6 months or so, I had a couple of car projects, and we started to introduce some of the car photography into Carl Taylor Education. We shot a really nice Mercedes AMG GT recently, which is going to be a series of tutorials, which is going to be 4 different angles on the car, including post-production, all the lighting, etc. But I thought, hey, why not? Let's do a live car shoot, or at least partially the shoot, because the problem with car shoots is they are notoriously difficult. They take a long time. There's a lot of things to consider. So what we've done today is we've done a full rehearsal on this car, got it lit really nicely, and we've got one light left in place, and then we're going to walk you through the process of how we figure out the lights so that we can hopefully arrive at a fairly complete finished car shot by the end of today's live show. As always with car photography, there's always little anomalies or little details or the odd reflection that it just won't work, or you can't get it to play ball because there's so many surfaces and shapes, etc. So there's going to be needed some post-production, and next week's show, next Thursday, is the post-production. So I'll be doing the full post-production from this shoot next Thursday to show you how we'll take this really nice car shot, which we're going to get to a really good level today anyway, but how we just sort of finish it off with little details. Right, let me just start off a couple of things. This is a Porsche Targa 4S apparently. We incorrectly said it was a Porsche GT 911 because we hadn't received the car yet. This has been kindly loaned to me by Nick Ravenscroft, who is one of our neighbours in the industrial park here. He's in another business. This is his car, and he's kindly loaned it to us for today's demo. It's nice and clean. It goes without saying, obviously, if you're going to do a car shoot, make sure the thing is clean, and it needs to be dust free, and we're going to high power air jet it in a second to make sure it's dust free as well. Now, what do we need to think about? Now, I know immediately you're going to go, hold on a minute, there's no way I'm going to have a studio with a big floating ceiling panel and a huge infinity cove and all that sort of stuff. And you're absolutely right. Most people don't. Most pro photographers don't. Most pro car photographers don't. They rent studios for the purpose when they need to do car shoots. There's also a lot of photography clubs that do club days at a car studio, and then they all chip in together to rent the studio and then shoot the car, etc. So even if you don't have the facilities yourself, what you're going to learn today will help you if you ever wanted to use the facilities, and then you'll understand how to use the facilities. And a lot of the lighting principles that we're applying here are exactly the same as ordinary product photography, except on a much larger scale. One of the things I love about car photography is it's extremely challenging because it is literally scaled up product photography. It is a product, but unlike many other products, it's multiple shaped in far more ways than a tube of toothpaste or an electric razor or an iPhone or a cosmetics bottle or many of the ordinary products that we're normally tasked with shooting. This is contoured in all directions with different angles, different materials, gloss, matte, glass, all sorts of stuff. So you have a lot more complexities, and it's all scaled up by size as well. Now, many people like cars with continuous lighting, usually Arris with Fresnels, so they can change the size of the ball of light and the gradient of the ball. Personally, that's not the way I like cars. I like them with flash, and I feel I've got a lot more control. One of the problems with using continuous light is controlling the exposure of that light You sometimes have to use ND gels or, move lights. With flash, I've got really fine control over my light levels, and the way I can modify my flashlights to create the gradients is perfectly, I think it's actually better than using continuous light, although you can mix continuous light. In one of the tutorials that we've got coming up on the Mercedes, I actually do mix some LED lighting, some studio flash lighting, and some other continuous light forms as well, to show you that that can be done as well. Right, now, just before I start giving you the breakdown on the first things to think about for car photography, as usual, we are taking your questions. Emma's on holiday this week, so Ashley's on the live desk taking the questions, and Georgie will be assisting me with the lighting. Right, so first thing you need to consider with car photography, and this is very important, is the angle of the view that you want to shoot. Because with a car shot, it's not a situation where you go, right, I'm going to shoot that angle, then I'm going to move a bit and shoot that angle, and then I'm going to move that and shoot that angle. And the reason is because as soon as you move, your lighting is relatively in a different position, and it may not be in the same patch and the same place on the car. So you really need to lock down and make that firm decision. So what I've already done is I've decided that I want the 3/4 view on the car. I've decided how far away I want to be on the car. And here's an important point. When you're really close to a car, so if you were with a shorter focal length, wider angle lens, you'd be closer to the car. And the closer you get to the car, the less you would see of that headlight over there and the less you'd see at the back. But the more you move back from the car, you're still at the same 3/4 angle, but all of a sudden you have a different perspective. You see more of various features of the car that you wouldn't have seen from here. So what I can see from here is completely different to what I can see from here. And that makes a big difference with such a big object. So you can see actually my camera is way back here. It's already locked down. It has a 100mm lens on it, which is equivalent to about 85mm, 80mm in the 35mm format. That's my shooting distance. So what I did is I spent a fair bit of time looking at the car with my eye, moving, use one eye as well because you want to see it in 2-dimensional rather than 3-dimensional, moving around, deciding, hold on a minute, what are the key features of the Porsche? You know, one of the key features of the Porsche are these raised dome parts on the wing that join into the light, into the headlights. That's a really key signature, if you like, of a Porsche. So you have to identify, you know, these key features. So that famous Porsche shape and nose, the famous Porsche back slope and wheel arch. Now we're not going to see the back, but you know, wanted to see a little bit of this as well. So I didn't want to go too frontal. I didn't want to go too sideways because then we wouldn't see the front of the car. So I've found my angle, and it took me about 4 test shots without lighting, just under the house lights, just to figure out the angle. Once I'd figured out the angle, I said, right, that's the focal length I'm happy with. That's the angle I'm happy with. Messed around a little bit with the shooting height as well. And then that's it. Lock the camera down, fix it solid, and don't pay any more attention to that, because there you start your lighting. And once you start that lighting process, there's no going back. You've got to fine tune and refine the lighting until you're happy. Because if you had to move the camera after that, because you said, oh, hold on a minute, I wish I'd moved over here, then when you move, every bit of lighting that you got perfect will kind of most likely be out of position somewhat, and you'd have to move again. So that's one factor. The other factor with locking the camera down really solid, just like we show you in a lot of product photography, there are instances where you may need to light one bit separately to another, and for you to build those layers up in Photoshop for the post-production, again, the camera can't move. The car's not going anywhere, obviously, so we don't need to worry about that, so your camera needs to be locked down. Let me explain a little bit about this thing and the Cove and how we use that for car photography. Car photography requires gradient lighting, but we don't use scrims. What we do is we actually light off big white panels, and the gradient is formed naturally because it's brighter here where it's closer to the light, and then it gradually gets weaker based on the inverse square law, and that is our gradient. And then we do the same thing into an overhead ceiling panel. Now, an overhead ceiling panel, or floating ceiling, whatever you want to call it, You can twist them, you can angle them. Quite often they're at an angle, because at an angle you can work your gradients better, and at a horizontal position the lighting just doesn't bounce into the car as well. So usually you will see car photography with a floating ceiling at this sort of angle. You can also swivel them around. They spin around a bit. You just put a line in it and hook it and move it around. We've just recently fitted this one into our studio for car photography. It was one we had made ourselves. We've got an electric winch up there. We've got a number of safety lines and safety ropes so that if the electric winch failed, we have 3 safety lines so that that are tied off so that the ceiling panel couldn't fall more than a few inches. And we can angle the lines to tilt the angle of the ceiling panel as necessary, whatever angle we deem necessary. This particular ceiling panel is a little bit small for car photography, I must admit, but it was about as big as I could fit or would willingly fit in this studio. Most rental car studios will have even bigger ceiling panels than this, but I can get by with this because sometimes I can extend it out with some poly boards to bring it out a little bit further. It works by and large for what I need it to do. A surround of white cove helps tremendously because you use that for lighting as well. And if you're renting a proper full-on car studio, then a complete U-shaped cove is even more beneficial, because then you can literally have a complete surround of light. So what I mean by that, this is an L-shaped cove, only goes to that far, but if it came around and down this side as well, it would be even better for car photography. Some of the biggest rental car photography studios even have a complete overhead control as well. So you can sometimes not even have to worry about this. You can actually, just basically the whole thing is you're like in a light box, essentially. Anyway, right, we've got one light in position. Let's look at how the physics of this is working. You can see this light that's shining into this wall. If you move more to camera position, Tim, so that you can see from there at the same angle, you'll see that this light that I'm stood in front of now, shining on the wall, is bouncing off of that wall and it's illuminating down the side of the car. We spent quite a bit of time manipulating that light backwards, forwards, closer to the wall, further from the wall, which will soften the light on the car or harden the light on the car. We're going to show you that to start with. It's actually in the position that I want it at the moment. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to get Georgie to put a mark on the floor so that we can return to the position it's in, because I don't want to lose it and waste time today on this. So we're going to get started on that, and then we're going to start showing you how we add lights in and the decisions that I make and the choices that we're faced with on how to light the car. While Georgie's getting that sorted out, we've got a question. Let's take that question.
Cool, we've got a few questions. The first one is from Camacho Photography saying about the camera position. They're just asking what the height of the camera is and why you chose that particular height.
Okay, so when you think about your shooting height, you kind of have to assume that most people are familiar with looking cars at eye level. Now I'm on the short side, but you know, that sort of eye level for most people. But a lot of cars look a little bit better and a little bit more aggressive from lower down. So I'm at the moment, my camera is at that height, so it's slightly below eye level. And I started off actually up here, and then I took a shot here, and it was just from my test shots that I decided this looked better at about that height. In the other tutorials that we've got coming later in the year on the Mercedes, we've got one shot right from above on the car. We've got one from low down. We've got different angles, different positions, and I'll explain the decisions, you know, when we're doing it. So there's nothing fixed in stone, but usually it's around about eye level or possibly lower depending on the car.
X is asking, do we keep the ceiling panel up all the time, or do we have a place to hide it?
Yeah, we have a place to hide it, Ted. It gets hidden up higher, up there. We just hoist it up much, much higher. It's too big, and it could unbolt and come apart, but that would take a lot of work. So we just hoist it up to the ceiling and it stays up there out the way.
And last one for now is from Yazid. What is the panel made of? He wants to know.
Okay, so it's an aluminium box frame section, which you can probably see from the wide shot. You can see it's made of aluminium and it's got cross sections to keep it all rigid and flat and structured. Then it's got eye bolts and various bolts and fastening positions for the whatever the straps are called, the struts to hold it. And then this material is called Foamex. This is it's a type of plastic foam board, and it's very bright white, but it was a little bit shiny. And then in the end, what we did was we had to sand it down and we painted it with pure brilliant white paint, the same as we paint the floor. And there's 3 panels. This is the biggest panels we could find. And if you look very closely, there's the join there and there's another join there. So it's 3 long panels going that way. If I had had a bigger studio, I would have done 4 panels and a slightly longer, a longer floating ceiling. This is quite lightweight and it's rigid, so it doesn't bend too much. And we Velcroed it onto the aluminium with double-sided Velcro. And I think we put a video on YouTube about that, didn't we? It's on our platform as well. So you'll find it in there. You actually see how we made the whole car rig. There's a whole video already published on that. Okay, right, let's start with this first light. So Georgie's going to crouch down and hide in the background. And she's also just going to go and tell me what power that light is on first of all, just so I've got as a reference. We've got no other lights on at all. We've got some other lights on, but they're not going to flash because I've turned the cells off. So the only light that's going to flash is that one. This light here is not for the car photography. This is just for video, so they can see us. So that's an LED light. There's another light over there. That's also not for the photography. Right, so oh, I tell you what, there's one thing I forgot to explain, but we'll take this first test shot. Let me just capture. Right, so we'll take that first test shot, see what we've got. There we go. We have, oh, it says capture failed, but it didn't. There you can see that lighting glow in the side of the car. But I forgot to explain something very important. And that is to do with focusing. This question comes up a lot. It's like, where do we focus on the car? Just go back a bit, Tim, so you see the whole car. That's it, right. So, do you focus at the front of the car, which is the most sort of important information? Or do you focus in the middle of the car? Or what do you do for depth of field? Because it's quite difficult with a large object to get the depth of field extending. I usually run a number of tests. So what I do is use the sort of hyperfocal distance rule. And I focus a third into where I want. So my focus point is currently here, and obviously parallel to the camera, that focus line is running through the car there. So that is what's in focus if I was shooting at full aperture. But I'm not shooting at full aperture, I'm shooting at f/16, and at f/16 that depth of field extends forwards just to about there, and it extends backwards to about here. So it is ever so slightly soft at the back, but not even noticeable, but it's sharp throughout the whole thing. You could use tilt and shift to enhance it, or you could use focus stacking if you were really stuck. But even with a car this size, f/16, I've got the depth of field, it's nice and sharp, front to back, but that required me to focus here and not here or not there. Got another question?
Yes, we do. Ted is just asking the size of the panels. Are they 8x4, he wants to know?
Well, the whole ceiling panel is 6 meters by 4 meters, the whole thing. So divide that by 3, and then you'll get a rough idea of what each of those white panels are. The other thing we use for car photography, but we don't need to use it today, we use these huge sheets of foam board. This is just normal foam board. That's the biggest sheet size you can get it. They're very long. I think they're about as long as that. And we use those to build a wall and make walls to bounce light into. So those are very handy. And if you want to see how to do a car shoot with less expensive equipment and do it in almost a sort of budget way, we do have an older tutorial on our product section where we photographed a black Karmann Ghia and a red TR7 classic car, and we did it in a warehouse with basic Elinchrom equipment and also just using polyboards on lighting stands overhead to create a sort of fake one of these. So it is possible if you understand the physics, which is what we're going to look at today. Got another question?
Yes, we do. One from Paul saying, is the colour of the car going to dictate the lighting?
Not from my point of view. I mean, it will obviously dictate how bright the light is because, you know, a silver or a white car is going to reflect more light, so there's more luminosity off of it. And a darker car is going to absorb more light, and then you've got metallic paints. But I don't really worry about it. I just look at it, look at the results that I'm getting, and I light based on what I'm seeing, and you know, that's it really. Many times with car photography you also need to light the background. In this case I'm not lighting the background, I'm just letting the background go to a nice mid dark grey. So my final image for this is going to be a sort of nicely lit silver car sitting in a sort of darkish grey studio area. But in some of the other car ones that you'll see coming later in the year, it's a darker grey Mercedes and it needed different lighting techniques, but you'll see it. This particular car, I've got to say that we started lighting it this morning for the tests, and I thought it was going to be more difficult, and it's actually a lot easier, this car, which is very surprising given the shapes of it. And I don't mean it was easy, because car photography is never easy, but it was easy for a car. Compared to the Mercedes AMG, which had a lot more lines and contours and different things, this one actually went very smoothly. That might have been partially luck, I don't know, but we'll see. Anyway, right, where were we? Let's look at that first test shot that we just took. And what you're seeing there on screen right now, you're seeing a beautiful gradient in on the door handle. Let's just let that image update. Seems to be running a little bit slow. Why is it not updating? What's going on there? Come on. Right, I'm just going to quit the software because it does this sometimes where it just seems to spanner out and then not want to play ball. So let's just restart it and see if we can get it working again. Let's quit any other software I've got open in case that's causing an issue. Oh, actually, it looks like that photo didn't record after all. Right, we're going to take the shot again. Just crouch down, please, Georgie. Right, so it may be that that first shot didn't record. Okay, there it is again. We'll zoom in this time, and there we are. Right, so you can see that lovely gradient glow of light that we're getting falling up the paintwork. Certain parts of the paintwork are catching it at different positions, which creates our lovely contours. Remind me later. So that's our first light. Now what I want to show you at this point is how easily the light is affected. I'm on the wrong camera. How easily the light is affected by small changes in position of the light. So if we look at what, Tim, if you go over there so you can see what Georgie's doing, and then the guys will see on the camera, on my results. So where you see the light is now, you can see from that, from where Georgie is. Now Georgie's going to move the light forwards towards the wall, but keeping it at the same angle, and she's just going to move it in, move it in, move it in, and stop it about there, plonk it down there, and then just let me have a quick check through camera. Yeah, hide yourself out the way again now, Georgie. And if we look at the shot we've got on screen at the moment, and we take the next shot, you'll see quite a big difference in change. There you go, look at the change in lighting. Now that's the specularity increase. So basically what we've done is the glow on the wall became stronger and smaller and more specular. And if we compare to the light just a foot further back, or is it a foot or 2 foot? How far did you move it?
Probably 2 feet.
2 feet, that's about 60 centimetres. There's the difference of a 60 centimetre reposition on the light. Now they're both nice, there's nothing wrong even with the more specular version, and if you were doing a particular style of car shot, that more specular version may be what you want. But just based on the tests and the way the car was looking earlier, I actually preferred the slightly softer version. But again, it's entirely what you want, but you need to understand the physics of what makes it go from that to that. And that's just one movement, one simple movement. The next movements that you can do obviously are up and down, or tilting up and down, and we're going to show that next. So what I'd like you to do now, Georgie, is remember the angle the light is at, because you need to put it back to that, but this time just aim it up the wall a bit further, please. So now you'll see it go up the wall, that's it there, stop there, and then just jump out the way again, and then we'll look at the shot that we've got on screen now, and then we compare it with this new one, and you'll see the change completely. Now we've lost all of the lower area of lighting. There's what we had before, and there's what we've got now. There's what we had before, and there was what we've got now. And you can see that doesn't work at all. So the physics is dictating that that light higher up the wall is not working for us. So we know already that that light looked a lot better for us as well. There are other little elements and details going on here, right? First of all, let me show you something. You see this lovely line down the side of the car? I'm going to zoom in it. That line there. That line is actually really quite important, and you'll often see it in car photography. That line gives a car a glossy look, whereas if you have just too many gradients, you end up with a more matte look. And in that shot, that line is kind of disappearing. Well, it's still there a little bit, but it's not quite as effective as it was there. It's not like that dark line that we've got there. It's the edge of a top of a thinner white strip. And what you're seeing there is actually the edge of this line here, and the darker patch is what's making that line in the bodywork. And as Georgie raised that light up here, the gradient from up there ended up higher down the side of the car, and when the light was further down the wall here in the lower position, then more of the light was in this part of the car. So it's all just angles of incidence and bounces and you know, basic physics really on where the light's going to go. If you can put the light back to where it was and then tilt it down towards the floor for this one, and we'll show the comparison on that. So that's where we are, that's where we were before she tilted it up. That's when we tilted it up, so that's where we were. Now it's pointed much further down to the floor, and we'll look at the result. And you see it changes again. So you see that lighting changes from that to that. Now, all of this is down to your decision making. I can't say to you, okay, you have to put the light there or there or there, because it all depends on the shape of the car. It all depends on the angle of the car. It all depends on, you know, even the curvature of the door. It depends on the distance from the wall. The only way that you can, you know, arrive at the right lighting is by test, test, test. And what I do with car photography, and I can tell you now, you can't do car photography without an assistant. Don't even bother, because it is extremely frustrating if you're trying to do car photography without an assistant. So what you must do is have an assistant move the light while you're looking through camera. And what actually happens is I get an assistant to hold a light like this and then work around, work along, move up and down, move about while I'm looking through camera. And I can see what's happening in the bodywork. And then as soon as I see something I like, I say, hold it there a minute, and then I take a test shot. And then from there, you fine tune it, and you might move it back a little bit, in a bit, put a diffusion on it, number of factors. But there is no, you know, this is one of those things, I think it was that, I think it's got to angle back up a bit, hasn't it? There is no formula for this. I often get asked, quite frustrating, people say to me, oh, what ratio of lights do I need? What modifier should I use for this? You use what you learn to use based on the physics you learn on this platform. You learn what the modifiers do, you learn the inverse square law, you learn about hard, soft light, refractive, angles of incidence, all of those things, and then you apply that knowledge and you do it based visually on what you see happening. And what I see happening when we're testing was, yeah, that line of light looks a bit high, it looked a bit stripy, that looked too low, and we ended up at that lighting position because that's what I felt worked. But as I showed you, even moving the light 60 centimeters closer to the wall, we still had a nice lighting, but it was just a little bit more specular, a little bit more high contrast. Now, in the same sense, if we moved the light further back, it would have just got a little bit softer down the side because the gradient would have got bigger, and it would have, obviously the gradient based on the inverse square law, the more we move the light further away, then the fall off intensity is reduced. It doesn't change as rapidly over that space of time or over that space of distance. So it's all a question of testing. You can apply the simple principles that if you look at something like that angle there, when you look at that angle, you know that what's going to go in that angle has to come from over here. If you're never sure about that, there's one great trick you can use, and I use this a lot in product photography. This isn't a good idea, but get a mirror and you put a flat mirror level with the angle that you want to look at, and you go to camera position and you look in the mirror, and what you see in the mirror is where the light's going to come from. Okay, that's how it works with glossy surfaces, is the angle of reflectance, that's called. And if you're never sure where that angle of reflectance needs to be, then a mirror can really help you out. Right, let's take a couple of questions.
Yeah, we've just got one from
One
Mark.
question.
Saying, how important is the angle of the panel, the ceiling panel, in such a large scale?
It is important because if it's tilted too high, then the gradient fall off will be much quicker because you will have the light that's brighter here gradually getting weaker, and then if it's higher, it's also even weaker as well. If it's too horizontal, you won't really get your light under it to be able to light. So this angle seems to be pretty good, but some people do shoot with higher angles, but they may use bigger scrims or bigger ceiling panels, and then they may have other lights at this end as well. So you imagine if you were in a bigger car studio with a floating ceiling that was twice the depth of this one, then you could afford to have it a steeper angle, and you could put more light into the other positions as well. So it is dependent really on the ceiling panel that you're using, but I would say we're at about a 15 or 20 degree angle. You know, obviously that would be horizontal, that would be 45 degrees. We're probably about halfway between horizontal and 45 degrees, somewhere in there, 22 degrees. But that's just a starting point.
From Marek saying, do you plan to show how to photograph the interior of the car in the future?
It's a good possibility. We hadn't thought of it. In one of the older tutorials, the one on the red TR7, we do shoot the interior or some of the interior of the car and some of the engine block as well. But yeah, we may look at an interior car shoot as a future option. Completely different technique for that. Completely different technique. And to be honest, many of the car photography on interiors, they take the doors off, windows out. Sometimes, they might even have a car without a roof to do it. Now, a lot of it's even CGI these days. So there are a lot of things in interior car photography that I can't do because Nick, who owns this, is not going to let me cut the roof and doors off his car.
A question from TEDx. For what other types of shoot would you or could you use this panel? Well,
actually, it's a good point, Ted. You can actually use this for lots of things because essentially this becomes a huge scrim. And you've seen us use scrims, big trace scrims from above on C-stands to light through. This does the same thing in reverse. You bounce light into it and it creates a gradient. It could be used for a number of things. It could be used for some product shoot. It's a bit of an overkill. You don't really want to photograph a lipstick with that, do you? It's like it seems a bit odd, but potentially you could.
Yeah, we've got Christopher asking, is there a significant difference between bouncing off a white panel or putting a light through a diffusion panel or scrim?
No, you can arrive at the same effect. Both will give you a gradient. The difficulty with car photography and using very large scrims and lighting from above is you just need more space. You also need to have a panel of material that doesn't warp or buckle, which is hard. So you normally need a cross structure on something this large, which means you can't light through it because you'll have shadows from the cross structure. But there are really huge softboxes that used to be made for car photography that allowed you to light downwards, but they were more of a homogeneous light source. So theoretically, yes, you could do it from above, but I think it's more complex. You've also got the difficulty of needing much bigger lighting stands and rigs to get over the top. And what we find with car photography is that you can actually hide a lot of your lighting behind the car from lighting underneath. So it's just really an efficiency and convenience factor that lighting into a panel reflectively is a little bit easier.
Collins is asking, is it necessary to build the lighting of the car starting from the back of it, moving to the front, say for example in this example with the Porsche?
No, it's not. But given most car photographies, the most important part is the front end. I just started with that backlight on the side because it was going to give me the least problems and trouble. I could really arrive at quite a nice lighting on the side of the car relatively easily compared to the front. And the other thing that you find with all product photography, especially with cars, is that whilst you might get the lighting looking great on your first shot and you think, yeah, that looks brilliant, when you actually finish the lighting on the rest of the car, all of a sudden that doesn't look as good as you thought it did because the other lighting makes it look a bit different. And I don't mean different in terms of luminosity, I just mean it may look too low contrast, and then you realize, hold on, I need it to be more specular. So even whatever you light on your first one, it may not end up being that by the time you finish the car, because it may be that, you know, you get your gradient glow in here and on here and everywhere else, and the way that looks amazing, then maybe that looks too soft. So then if that looks too soft, you have to move it in a bit to increase the specularity. So no lighting is set in stone or should be set in stone on any product until you're, you know, really fine tuning it at the end, because everything you apply has an influencing visual factor on everything else. So you really just make it decisions and work along and work along and work along.
A question from Kartik, I think that's how you say it, saying, for lighting car details like the wheel, logos, etc., would you shoot through or bounce light off?
I'm not going to shoot through anything. There will be a direct light on one of the wheels, as you'll see afterwards. As a matter of fact, that's a good point of topic. Now, if we go to the last shot, Ben, well, actually, let's go to the shot that was how we're going to want it lit, more like that one, or that one, I think it was. That was the harder specular one. That was the other one. So that's more how we want it lit. But what you'll notice when you look at that is that the back wheel already has quite a nice lighting on it because it's just catching that light off the wall. But the front wheel's somewhat further away, so it doesn't have the same level of illumination. Whilst the illumination on it is nice and it could easily be pulled up in Photoshop, I'd rather have it in camera looking a bit better. So I am going to light that wheel separately. Other details of the car will just be, you know, I'm looking at more of a general car shot. We're not really even going to be able to read the Porsche logo here. But if we were doing a shot of the Porsche logo, I would probably still prefer to light into this than light on it. But that's a great example of where in a smaller area you could have an overhead scrim and light through the scrim and get beautiful gradient results just the same. How many more questions you got?
3 more at this point.
Okay, let's quickly take those 3 and then we'll stop the questions for a minute because we have to move on with the shoot.
Paul is asking, would you ever have the vehicle fixed at an angle, like raised on one side or corner?
Don't think so. They do that sometimes at trade shows to make them look more interesting, but it's not something I would do. One of the problems with car photography is repositioning cars, especially in a small space. So, you know, moving the car, we've constantly got to drive it, reverse it, and an assistant's got to tell you where to put it. And then once it's in position, you see we've got a lovely clean white floor around here. Once it's in position, we just paint over all the tyre marks. If you look clearly here, we didn't need to paint out here because that's not in the shot. But look at all the tyre marks from the previous shoots we've done. Out here, loads of tyre marks. All we've done is put a quick coat of paint over that just an hour or so ago. And only in the area we needed to. There are devices you can get that jack the wheels. They're called wheel jacks. They roll under the wheels. You put one under each wheel, you pump it up and it lifts the whole car off the ground, and you can spin the car on the spot like, you know, just like a skateboard type thing, rotate it, revolve it around, put it in position and then drop it down again. Saves you even getting marks on your floor. So, but they're quite expensive, those wheel jacks.
Slim is asking, with how many lights can you achieve nice results?
Well, actually, surprisingly, with this one, we achieved really nice results with just 3 lights. And I've got to say that's rare for a car. I think when we did the Mercedes AMG GT the other day, we may have ended up with about 9, I can't remember, 9 lights, 8 or 9. But we did get to a really good position, even with 3 lights, but then we needed the extra light on the wheel and a couple of bits and bobs, so it may end up at 5. But it depends. The other thing is, though, with car photography, you can use the multiple lighting technique, where you basically, once you've got all your lights figured out, you can move, you mark it on the floor, black tape, angle, write down the power, and then move it to a new position, and then like that, because you can build those multiple layers up and then blend them all together. It's not the best way of doing it, but it can be done.
And Christopher is asking, the light on the side wall, when you look at the shot, it can be seen on the floor at the back of the car. Is this something you would remove in post?
It will be removed in post, and that will be shown next week, how we actually make the floor all perfect and lovely smooth gradients and how we deal with that. So yeah, there's going to be another patch of light on the floor here that's quite distinctive that we wouldn't want in the final shot, but it has to be there, as you'll see later, because I need it to light something afterwards. Right, okay, we're going to crack on. Right, let's move on. We're going to move on to the light on the bonnet, and we've got 2 lights that we're going to be bringing in to illuminate the bonnet. One of them is just a sort of general broad light on the bonnet, which we're going to bring in first. And then the second light, which took me a lot of time earlier to work it out, is to get a patch of light on here that really shows that distinctive Porsche shape here. And without it, I didn't feel it really yelled Porsche at me. But the problem is, in getting that distinctive line of light, it adds more light on the bonnet. And next week in the post-production one, I may show you what we do to just retain that one and not have it on the other, but we'll see how we go when we come to that. So first of all, we've got a light here. It's just another studio light with a P70. You know, we're not using any fancy modifiers here. We've actually, the other light is just a P70 as well. So nothing particularly difficult or problematic, just standard reflectors firing up, as you can see there. So I'm going to plonk that one down round about there. Georgie's going to fine tune it in a minute. We're going to just follow that cable, which is that one, turn this light off, and we're going to go and take a test shot. So if you man that light, or lady that light, please, Georgie. I don't know what the right phrase is for that. Right. Let's look at our shot that we've got on screen. Oh, did we put the other light back to where it was meant to go? Yeah? Okay, so the light that we wanted initially was like this. We've now got our second light in there. Take that shot. No result. Oh, because the trigger's not on. Put the IRF and the cell button on, please. Those were off on the pack. So we take that shot again. And we now... There we go, a lovely patch of light over the bonnet of the car. Now what you're seeing on screen, it's quite interesting this, I find it's quite interesting because we've actually only got 2 lights. So the person who asked before, how many lights do you need? Well, there's just 2 and it's not looking too bad already. So, and it's 2 lights with the most basic of modifiers you can possibly get your hands on. The question that I'd be looking at now, looking at that image, is, well, what power do I want that light? What power is that light on, please, Georgie? Right, put it on 5, just so that our viewers can see the difference. We've now dropped a stop off that light, and we're going to take the shot again. And you see that darkens that down. Now that brings that bonnet more into keeping with the level of exposure that is on the side of the car. If I jump back, that was 1 stop brighter, and that's 1 stop less. So that's probably a better starting point for us. Now, if we also look at that bonnet, let's look at that lovely gradient of light across that bonnet, across that paintwork. You see how that gradient works there? Now that's beautiful. And that, again, if you look at the ceiling panel, that's where it's coming from. If you look at Tim's camera, there you go. That's what that light on the bonnet, that's where it's coming from. It's just that gradient bouncing off of the floating ceiling panel. And that's why we need the floating ceiling panels, because a lot of the most important parts of car photography is this bit and the top surfaces. So it's got to have a big panel of white above it. As I said, if you were doing it on the cheap or on a budget, look at the older tutorial we've got where we made one of these just out of foam boards on C-stands. Right, so that light is in a pretty good position, but let me show you something on screen that is a problem with that. This definitive Porsche shape is partially picked up here, but not strong enough, okay? That there says Porsche, that bit there and that bit there. And this bit's quite good because it's already got naturally picked up a dark line, so you know that that bit is separate from the rest of the shape of the bonnet there, which is good. But this one isn't really shouting it out enough for me, so I'm not quite happy with that. So we're going to add some more light, and this was the one that took us ages, and that's why we've already marked down where it goes. We know it's going on these bricks, and we know it's going to have this honeycomb grid in, but I'm going to take it out first just to show you the reason why we need that in a minute. We're going to turn that light on, and I'm going to take, we'll start, the other one's on power 5, so we'll also start with this one on power 5. It's going to be way too much. Now, if I put that light into position, which is I know where it has got to go, and put the modelling light on, you see that's putting a patch of extra light in here now. And that extra patch of light is catching that bit that I really want there, that really important bit. But unfortunately, the physics means it's also putting a bit in there. And there's absolutely nothing I can do to stop that. I can't mask that out because then it will mask the other light out. There's nothing I can do. All I can do is try to find a happy balance between the two lights. And then in the post-production, I'm going to have to lift this one up more. Or I'm going to have to shoot that one separately and that one separately, and in the post-production just layer that part in without the bit that's on the bonnet. And that's maybe what I'll do and show you next week. But let's look at what the result will be with the second light, where it is now on power 5 with no grid. Boom, take the shot, and there you go. Now we've flooded the bonnet with way too much light, which is not what we want. It does light up that top ridge of the part that we were talking about, but it's not doing it in a way that I liked. So actually it'll be a little bit easier to show you if I turn this modelling light off a minute and we just look at that one. Here is a medium, I think, grid. A medium, we got like 3 strengths of grids in the Broncolor P70s. This one is the medium strength one. Don't ask me the angle, I have no idea. We're popping that on there. Now all I've done is made that patch of light a lot smaller than it was. And I'm going to go to camera now, and my trusty assistant is now going to maneuver that light as necessary. As a matter of fact, it's in exactly the right position already. What I'd like you to do, Georgie, so that the audience can see this more clearly, is go to the pack and turn that other one off and just leave that gridded one on, please. So what you'll see on this next shot, okay, is just that light with the grid this time. And there you see it. You can see it actually on the ceiling panel, but you can see now how it's condensed to that area illuminating that crucial bit of Porsche shape that I want. But here's the unfortunate side effect of it. The unfortunate side effect is that it's adding this massive patch of light there at the same time that is going to be combined with the other light on the car bonnet that I've already got. And unfortunately, I don't want that patch of light. So this is where I see a physics problem that I can't overcome, which means I have to find a way of dealing with it in post-production, because I don't want to sacrifice or compromise that part of the car with that. I could arrive at a happy medium, which is where we probably will arrive in a minute with two lights, but I think I'm going to save a shot with that. Now at the moment that's nowhere near bright enough. What power we got on that one, please, Georgie? Let's go to power 6, please, on that light. We take a shot, we look at that light get a lot brighter. There we go, that starts to give me, look at that beautiful, oh, look at that. I live for this, look. I live for those gradients like that in there. Just that beautiful sense of luxury in there. I think we could probably go up half a stop more. I'm going to take that shot. There we go, gets a little bit brighter, but now it's getting really bright on the bonnet. But anyway, what's going to happen is that we're going to add the other light back in. We're going to then see the bonnet being overexposed. We're then going to have to bring that other light back down. And then once I've finally lit the whole car, at the end, I'm going to shoot that particular light on its own. So I know I've got it as a layer, or I'm going to turn it off, sorry, so that I don't have it affecting the main bonnet part of the car at the same time. Pop the other light back on now, please, Georgie. So our original bonnet light is now coming back on. You can pop the modelling light back on underneath it, please. And we'll take that shot now. And we go from the one we had before, now adds in that. And it's not bad, but you can see my dilemma. My dilemma is now that I have a patch of light here. Let me just zoom in on that a little bit for you. I have a patch of light here that is a brighter stripe across the bonnet than I would like. And the reason I've got that is because I need that light there. Now, if we compare, if we go back to before we added that light, which was back there, look, that's what I want. I want that. But I also want that on the top of there. And this is my dilemma. So unfortunately, it's one of those problems that I cannot fix in camera. Now, what I can do is I can say, well, hold on a minute, I could probably dodge this light, this one up a little bit in post-production. So I might as well just reduce it on the bonnet a little bit. So what power are we on, Georgie?
6.5 and 5.
So the one that's on the 6.5. Well, let's take half a stop off of it. Actually, no, take a stop off of it. So we're going to drop that one that is, let's just zoom in a bit. We're going to drop this one down one stop now, which will take one stop off the bonnet as well. Do the shot. So there's one stop off the bonnet, which does help. And there is still enough light on that bit that I can dodge that up in post-production later. But what we can also do to counterbalance it a little bit is maybe take the other one up half a stop. So we'll take the one that's closest to me, that one, yeah. We're going to take that one up half a stop to sort of balance in and match a little bit better with the one before. So here we go, there you go. Now the two sort of blend together a little bit better. Probably go up another half a stop just to see what it looks like. Take the shot. They might start, yeah, was that the right one that went up then? Wrong one went up. So Georgie accidentally put the other one up, which I noticed made the other bit lighter. So we'll just jump back to the shot we were at before. We do the shot again. Now this bit should get lighter here, and it does. Now that's not too bad. Now the front lights sort of blend together to make that other one less noticeable in the bonnet. But the problem is the exposure on the bonnet of the car is now overall brighter than I would like. And if I bring both of them down, I lose that ridge of lighting on the other one. So I don't like it, I'm afraid. So take half a stop off of the light that's closest to me, please. And we're going to revert to using the technique of doing it in 2 separate shots and putting it together in post-production, which will be good anyway for next week's show, because we'll see the differences in the post-production stage. That's more of the exposure level that I would like across the front of the car. But anyway, we'll come back to that afterwards. Okay, now, where are we? We've got 3 lights. So only 3 lights, and we're looking good. We know that this area at the front of the car is a bit dark, around the front edge, the wheel, and this bit of grille. Now, what I noticed earlier when I was shooting this, I noticed, well, you know what? There is some really nice lighting falling just in this area, just here, in that front grille. Let me zoom in on that. There's already a glow of light coming in there that looks really nice, but it's coming from where? It's coming from nowhere. How's that there? Where's it? I haven't got a light there. And obviously, if we look at it and we think about it, what's happening is we have some light from the white floor bouncing into this area that looks really nice, but it's just not bright enough. So when I saw that earlier, I thought, there's an opportunity. Let's light that up more. And the only way we can do that is we know the light's coming from the floor into there already. So let's light the floor in that spot and accentuate that even more, which is what we're going to do now. And while we're doing that, let's take however many questions we've got.
Cool. We've got one from Marco saying, what about light painting in car photography?
Yes, it is a technique, and I know some guys that do it really well. We did do a bit of light painting on the Mercedes on one shot to show you the technique, but I'm not a fan of it because the results are too random. Basically, light painting, you can have a huge long stick of light that basically acts like a giant overhead panel, but it's obviously only very thin. But what you do is you walk over it, over the car, in one long sort of 10-second, 20-second exposure, and it basically creates a huge light panel over the car. But there are many problems with that, in the sense that if you change speed as you move, the light becomes patchier. So it's doable, and it's a great technique to play with and have fun with, and you can come up with some amazing results, lighting one patch of a car at a time, firing a light there, firing another light there, light painting it with a light stick, and I've seen some amazing results, but they do seem to require a lot more post-production. I'm going to give you a result today that looks good in one shot, essentially.
Craig is asking, are you able to achieve the same lighting effect by using a light with a softbox pointed directly at the car instead of bouncing off the wall or ceiling?
No. And Craig, I'll put that down just to maybe you're new or don't have the experience yet in product photography. I'll put it as simply as possible so we don't take up too much time. A softbox is a homogeneous light source. That means the light is even. All the way over that whole square is even. A gradient light on a wall or through a scrim is exactly that. It's a gradient. It starts with one level of intensity and brightness, and then it gradually becomes weaker. And that is the most beautiful light you can put on gloss surfaces. You don't want to put homogeneous panels of light on gloss surfaces, because what is a gloss surface? A gloss surface is a mirror. So all you're doing is reflecting an image of the light source itself. You don't want to reflect just a white square or a solid white square or an even patch of light. You want to reflect gradients because they look so much more luxurious. You'll find the physics of that covered in the portrait section, section 1, all about understanding light and that stuff.
We have a question from Richard asking, are you using a polarizer?
Not yet. I do have to show you one thing with a polarizer afterwards though.
And one from Graz, are you intending to remove the ceiling panel in post for the final shot?
Actually, you know what, I was thinking of leaving it there and leaving some lighting stands and some cables as well. Of course we're going to remove the ceiling panel. What do you think? Every car, we don't want the ceiling panel, we don't want anything in it. We want the car looking heroic in a beautiful grey space. That's all part of next week's show when I do the post-production.
Kartik is asking, I have seen certain automotive photographers using black cloths on the floor as well as cutters near the sidewalls to cut light and achieve perfect highlights. Can you shed some light on this?
We can. It's covered in the tutorials on the Mercedes AMG GT that you'll see later in the year.
Then we have 2 questions relating to these 2 front lights you've added. Nat is asking, will having a negative fill help reduce the spill on the bonnet from the second light?
No, because the light is not... The light on the bonnet is a reflected image of the light in there. Where can we put a negative fill to take it out? We can't. If we block anything in there, it will just be a reflection in the bonnet. So it's just not feasible. It's far easier for me just to do an exposure level for one area and another, and then get there. When we did the Mercedes, I was able to pretty much light everything